Hi. Okay, so this is part two of the first lecture in documentary. In part two, I want to introduce the idea of writing for documentary. In the first part, we talked about the history of documentary a little to give you an idea of what sort of form it is, or at least where it's come from. I want to explore that a little bit more in this section. In other words, introducing you to some short documentary films of approximately the same duration that you want to make in this course, to look at different styles in documentary, but also to introduce the idea of writing. So probably the first question on the table would have to be, why would you bother to write for documentary? Surely a documentary is filming something in real time, and documenting it, turning the camera on, seeing what you record, and then putting it in a straight line. Theoretically, okay, writing can serve a number of different purposes. It can put your ideas in a straight line. That's true. The next thing, you can explore the best way to tell the story, from what angle to approach it narratively. And also of equal importance is that you can inspire other people to want to see your film made. And that almost always has to do with financing. So therefore, you're going to use the tools of the writer to get the funding for your documentary film, or to build trust in the fact that you, the filmmaker, are the best person to make this film. Okay, so maybe before we go too far down the writing line, and we won't in this first lecture go too far at all, let's just talk about what documentary is. And from the history, we've got a certain sense of some of the elements that inhabit the form. Obviously, it's something that has some sort of respect for actuality, even though it might sometimes bend the boundaries of that actuality in the filmmaking process. It's something that is politicised. It's something that brings with it a point of view, a filmmaker's point of view. It has an exterior world, but it also has an interior world. So in other words, there's something going on between what happens on the surface and what the film is actually really trying to say. Okay, what I'd like you to do now is to have a look at the films that I've put in the links in the teacher's notes for this first lecture. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 little films there. And they vary in length between 16 minutes and 2 minutes. So have a look at them all, and look at them in full, because you will see that the styles differ in all of these films. You will see that the style that the filmmaker has chosen for each one of these films reflects something beyond the ego of the filmmaker themselves. So in other words, it's not, I'm Fred, I always make these sort of films, this film's going to have this style hanging over it because I am making the film. Often the style of a documentary film reflects the character that you're trying to illustrate, the political stance that you're trying to illustrate, the relationship, the aesthetic relationship to truth, and also places the film in some sort of historical context, present, the past, the future, and how you vary those elements. Documentary films can be made in any number of different styles, and I encourage you to experiment with as many of them as you can. The styles can be poetic, they can be stylistic, they can be heavily structured with a very strong 3-act structure. They can be participatory, whereby the filmmaker actually involves themselves in the making of the film. They can become heavily reflexive, whereby the documentary actually sits in the edit suite, and decisions about how to cut, where to cut, how to shape the film. The filmmaking process can become a reflexive element within the film itself. Sometimes the filmmaker can tell us a story, sometimes a story in the present tense, maybe an essay film. A documentary can be journalistic. It can be a journey. It can be a road movie. There's just a number of different ways to crack those stylistic elements. Importantly, and you'll see this in the notes, is that I want you to look at what I call the 3 rules for organising your thoughts. And those 3 rules are, and by these 3 rules, I mean these are the 3 rules that you would use to shape up your own films. These are the 3 rules that I'd like you to reflect on while you're writing your pitch. These are the 3 rules that I'd like you to reflect on when you're making your film. These are the 3 rules that I'd like you to reflect on when you're in the edit. And the 3 rules are simply these: what are you trying to tell? How are you going to tell it? And thirdly, why do we care? Why is it important? Why are you bothering to take up my time with this story? So I'll just repeat those. What are you trying to tell? How are you going to tell it? And, why do we care? So these things are going to be reflected in your pitch. Now, the pitch, importantly, is a selling document. It's a document that should be persuasive. It should be analytical in that, you're going to tell us the elements that inhabit your story, but you're also going to sell it to me. So therefore, the language that we use in a pitch as writers is persuasive, that this is a film that must be made. This is a film that needs to be financed. This is a film that everybody will want to see. This is a film that will passionately move us from one place to another. Okay, so what does the pitch contain? The pitch contains a description of who or what it is that we're illustrating in this film. What do you already know about it? What do you, the filmmaker, already know about this? And what do you want to do with it? What are you going to actually turn this into? Now, if you're stuck and you don't know how to write a pitch at all, go to the files and have a look there among the listings, and there are some pictures there in the files in Canvas, and you can see there various pictures. Importantly, if you're stuck and you don't know how to begin, just come up with a title for your film, Fred Goes to Hollywood, and put the word "is" after it. Fred Goes to Hollywood is a film about, and that will just kick you off. Fred Goes to Hollywood is a unique story that I came across last year. Fred Goes to Hollywood is a dynamic, sarcastic, ugly, but meaningful, da-da-da-da. Okay, so you might be able to use that as a tool. Don't get too trapped in your pitch into telling us the whole story. We're not interested in the whole story. Just give us an idea, a précis of the sort of story this is. So it might be, for example, my film is about a bloke named Dean, and Dean wants to give up smoking. Okay, well, that's all right. But what is behind that story? That's part of what should be in your pitch. In other words, it answers that third element of the 3 basic rules. Why do I care? Why does Dean want to give up smoking? What will happen if he succeeds? What will happen if Dean fails in his quest to give up smoking? And in what way does it relate to me, So in other words, there has to be something at stake. And documentary makers often use those words, what's at stake? And if you're pitching a film to a broadcaster, the broadcaster will say, yes, I get it. It's a film about, budgies, or it's a film about steam trains, but what's at stake? Why is my audience going to care about this topic? So there's another thing that you can put in your list for the elements that should inhabit your pitch. What's at stake? And going back again to the 3 rules, what are you trying to tell? How are you going to tell it? And why do we care? Okay, so that more or less summarizes the sort of elements that should be in your pitch. Importantly, your pitch should be succinct. A short, sharp pitch is better than a long, waffly one, because people who read pitches are usually reading 100 in a day, and they're going to finance 2 or 3 films, you know. So your pitch should be succinct, it should be well written and to the point, and it should sell your ideas heavily. The other important thing is access. Documentary makers talk about access. Access means that if you're going to do a film about Dean giving up smoking, first of all, you need access to Dean. So that's your first point of access. You need access to Dean's house or Dean's workplace, wherever you're going to film it. That's access. But importantly, Dean might have a girlfriend and she's the one who's motivated him to give up smoking, perhaps. And do you have access to Dean's girlfriend? And there might be some sensitive issues between the two of them. Are they willing to talk about that? That's access. So in other words, your documentary is going to be very bland if you're only ever analysing the surface issues within your film. You have to be able to dig deeper. And if your subjects won't allow you to dig deeper, you don't have access. So in other words, access can take the form of physical access. Are you going to be allowed into this place? Have you got the character? But also where the character is likely to take you. That's also access. Okay, so we've sort of got to the end of the second part. Have a look at the notes. This is the second and final part. I've more or less finished the lecture part of it. Please be aware that you've got work to do in week 3, deliverable in week 3. That's the pitch, the one-page pitch. And I will speak more about that in the second lecture. I'll go into that in some detail. What I would suggest to all of you is to think of an idea for your pitch and also start communicating amongst your friends and fellows within this class and see if you can find yourself into groups of 3. Normally I'd do this in the classroom, but I'm asking you to talk to each other on Facebook or whatever, communicate with each other, email each other, and see if you can form into groups of 4 and then have a look through the 4 pitches that each and every one of you has written within that group and maybe choose one, you know, amongst the 4 of you and say, oh, this is easily the best one. This is the one we all want to get behind, you know. Okay, so that's it for the first lecture in this series. Again, welcome to the course, and I look forward to working with you for the next 12 weeks. Okay, thank you.